Just after midnight, the US will be reimposing sanctions on Iran. It's the first major step since the Trump administration withdrew from the nuclear agreement, which the president called the worst deal ever earlier this year. Iran's president accused Mr. Trump of psychological warfare by offering talks while simultaneously imposing sanctions. Our North America editor John Sopel reports.
The demonstrations may be sporadic and they may be geographically widespread. But discontent across Iran with the state of the country's economy is high and could be about to get a whole lot higher still. The US will reimpose sanctions from tomorrow, making life even tougher. So what can be done to avoid this? President Trump's national security advisor was characteristically blunt.
They could take up the president's offer to negotiate with them, to give up their ballistic missile and nuclear weapons programs fully and really verifiably, not under the onerous terms of the Iran nuclear deal, which really are not satisfactory, to stop their support for international terrorism, to give up their military activities in the region.
The sanctions are a direct result of America pulling out of the Iran nuclear deal, negotiated by the Obama administration along with Britain and other European nations. In return for halting its nuclear program for a decade, the country was promised sanctions relief. President Trump always maintained it gave Iran far too much for too little in return. So today he signed a new packet of measures, warmly welcomed by allies in the region.
I praise President Trump and the American administration for the decision to impose sanctions on Iran. This is an important moment for Israel, for the US, the region and the entire world. It signifies the determination to halt Iran's regional aggression and also its ongoing plans to arm itself with nuclear weapons.
The sanctions will hit Iran's car industry, trade in gold and precious metals and the ability to purchase US currency in foreign exchange markets. From November 2018, sanctions will be extended and they'll target Iran's crucial oil industry. But from Tehran today, defiance.
Trump and his government are the ones who have rejected negotiations and have turned their back on diplomacy. What he is doing is against the Iranian nation and against the national interests of Iran. Iran is ready for diplomacy if there's honesty in the process.
On the streets and in the markets, the Iranian economy has been rocked by the sharp decline in the value of the rial against the dollar, sparking social unrest. America says its goal is not regime change, but it's certainly turning the heat up on Iran's rulers. John Sopel, BBC News, Washington.
For more on these sanctions and Tehran's reaction, I spoke a brief time ago with Robin Wright, a fellow at the Woodrow Wilson Centre and writer for The New Yorker. Robin Wright, the administration says this campaign of unprecedented pressure on Iran is supposed to get it to renegotiate the nuclear deal and change its behaviour in the Middle East. Is that going to happen?
Well, first of all, it's not unprecedented. The fact is that the world spoke with one voice in imposing international sanctions on Iran during the Obama administration. And this is really just the United States. The other 5 parties, major powers, to the nuclear accord, Britain, China, France, Germany, and Russia have all decided to stick to it. Now, the psychological impact is such that companies in many of those countries will opt out because they face sanctions if they sell goods or do deals with Iran. So it will have an impact, but it's likely to be more of a slow squeeze with smaller companies trying to do their own deals and Iran not totally isolated.
Hassan Rouhani is saying that he would think about entering talks with the United States, but only if it can prove its trustworthiness. Does that sound to you like there's no possibility of talks?
Well, the curious thing is that the Trump administration, even as it imposes sanctions, is saying, yes, we're willing to talk with the Iranian leaders. And the Iranian leaders are saying, yes, we're willing to talk to the United States, but as long as they're trustworthy. And I'm not sure that either one of them is very genuine or is at a stage that they would trust what would come out of some kind of negotiation. Of course, the ultimate irony is that the United States will be lucky to get a deal as good with North Korea as it had with Iran and walked away from.
Now, in November come the really tough sanctions against Iran, when the sanctions are reimposed on its ability to export oil. What do you think that will do to the already crumbling Iranian economy?
Well, the U.S. sanctions come at a particularly pivotal moment, and that is a time where there are growing protests on the streets over economic issues, unemployment, youth opportunities, even women's hijab, head covering. And so there is this sense that in Washington that this might squeeze the regime to either into further concessions or lead to protests that actually end up challenging the regime itself. Whether it'll get to that point, it's not, you don't see it yet, but November 4th, which happens to be the anniversary of the takeover of the U.S. Embassy, the day that oil sanctions will go into effect, will really be the most pivotal moment. And if Iran can't sell its oil, it's very hard to see how it solves some of its basic core economic problems.
So when Hassan Rouhani says really this is about creating division within Iran, is he right to some degree?
President Rouhani is probably accurate that this is a campaign that's targeting Iran not just for its meddling, its human rights abuses, foreign influence, support of extremism, and its nuclear program, that it also is aimed domestically. The regime is, frankly, rather paranoid about what U.S. intentions are. There have long been claims by assorted Iranian leaders about the U.S. attempt at a velvet revolution. It'll be very interesting to see, as the United States ratchets up sanctions, what else it does in terms of expressing support for protesters.
Robin Wright, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.